"You're not real family." That's what my own mother said to me, and she didn't just say it. She laughed when she did it, as if she'd just delivered the funniest punchline in the world. I remember the air going thin in my lungs. It was at my sister's engagement dinner, a place where people were supposed to be celebrating love and new beginnings, and yet there I was, being gutted by the very woman who gave me life. The silence that followed her cruel little joke was so heavy it felt like it would break the expensive glass in the restaurant. I looked her dead in the eyes, and I told her, without raising my voice, "Neither is my money then." I then did something I'd been contemplating for years. I paid for my dad's meal, I threw down a tip so large the server nearly cried, and I just walked right out the door, leaving the entire bill, a bill that was over $2,000, mind you, sitting right in front of my mother. The check sat there, a white flag of surrender or a declaration of war, depending on how you looked at it. No one at that entire table moved, not my sister, not my fiancé, not my mother. They just watched me go. I have played that scene back in my head 1,000 times since, and I still can't figure out if I handled it right. Was I wrong for the way I stood up for myself, even if it meant blowing up my relationship with my entire family? Tell me honestly if you would have done the exact same thing, to really understand why a mother would say something so vicious to her own child, and why I would respond by leaving her with an astronomical bill. We have to go back to the beginning, back to the history that made me the outsider. I am 28 years old, and I am the product of my mother's first marriage. My dad, the man I call dad in the story, is actually my stepfather. My biological father was, well, he was a mistake, a regrettable college fling that resulted in me, and he's been completely out of the picture since I was 2. When I was 5, my mom met Richard, who is dad to me, and he has always treated me like his flesh and blood. Always. He's the one who taught me how to fish, how to change a tire, and how to believe in myself. He's the reason I went to a good college and got the successful career I have now. Richard is my father, period, but to my mother, and especially to my half-sister, Chloe, I was always Richard's adopted daughter, or more coldly, the one from the first marriage. Richard and Mom had Chloe 5 years after they got married. Chloe, my half-sister, has always been the golden child, the real daughter in their eyes. She was beautiful, she was smart, and she was always celebrated. I was just present. My mom's passive-aggressive comments started early. If I got a good grade, it was, well, you probably got that from your real father, whatever happened to him. If I bought a nice car, it was, it's good Richard helps you out, unlike your poor sister, who has to do everything herself. It was a constant low-level war of attrition designed to remind me that my existence was a complicated footnote in their otherwise perfect family story. I learned to just take it, to smile, nod, and let the cruel words roll off me like water off a duck's back. For Richard's sake, I stayed. He was my anchor. He was my family. The financial disparity was another huge issue, and it's why the money comment had such a big impact. I've been incredibly successful in my career. I'm an engineer, and I started my own consulting firm straight out of university. I make very good money, a lot more than Richard, and significantly more than my mother, who works part-time at a local clinic. Chloe, on the other hand, is still finding herself. She jumps from job to job, relies heavily on Mom and Richard, and is constantly getting into some sort of financial bind. They constantly hit me up for help. It started innocently enough, a few $100s for a broken fridge, a few thousand for a student loan payment, but it escalated. Last year, I bought Richard a new truck because his old one was falling apart, and he refused to spend the money. That was my gift, purely for him, out of gratitude and love. My mother and Chloe were furious. Why don't you help us like that? My mother had shrieked at me. My rule was simple. I will help Richard, and I will help with emergencies, but I will not subsidize Chloe's lifestyle because she refuses to get her act together. This made me the villain. They saw my success as their failure, and they saw my money as a communal resource that I was selfishly hoarding. They never saw my money as belonging to me. They saw it as belonging to the family, the real family. The irony, of course, is that they only ever remembered I was family when they needed something from my bank account. The engagement itself was another huge financial sinkhole. Chloe was engaged to a man named Trevor, who comes from a wealthy old money family, and my mother was obsessed with making the engagement party and the subsequent wedding an affair worthy of their in-laws. This meant a constant stream of requests from me for financial contributions, none of which were ever framed as a request, but as a demand. The family needs this. It would be an embarrassment to Richard if you don't step up. And the worst one, you need to show Trevor's family that our side is just as generous. I reluctantly agreed to pay for the rehearsal dinner, thinking that would be my olive branch, my way of showing Richard that I still cared about the family unit, even if the women in it drove me crazy. The restaurant was one of the most exclusive in the city. The private dining room was opulent, with velvet curtains and crystal chandeliers. It was clear my mother had gone all out. The table was set for about 12 people. Richard and Mom, Chloe and Trevor, Trevor's parents, Mr. and Mrs. Peterson, stiff, impeccably dressed people, a couple of aunts and uncles, and me and my fiancé, Alex. I had already put down a deposit of $500, and the final bill, which I knew would be steep, was my responsibility. The night started out okay. Richard was being his usual sweet self, cracking jokes and making sure I was comfortable. Alex and I were making polite conversation with Trevor's parents, trying to appear respectable and well-adjusted. The alcohol, however, loosened everyone's tongues. My mother, who had too many glasses of expensive champagne, started getting louder and more performative. She was trying desperately to impress the Petersons, telling exaggerated stories about Chloe's achievements. The Petersons, to their credit, mostly just nodded politely, but I could tell Mrs. Peterson was observing our family dynamic with a keen, almost surgical interest. The conversation turned to the wedding costs, which was the topic my mother was clearly leading up to. She started listing off expenses, sighing dramatically, and then turned to me with a saccharine smile. "Well, thank goodness for our little engineer," she said, raising her voice so Trevor's parents could hear. "She's so successful, bless her heart. She's taking care of the entire rehearsal dinner for us. It's such a relief to the family. It wasn't the acknowledgement that bothered me, it was the framing. She made it sound like I was doing it out of pity or as a burden relief, not as a loving gesture. I just smiled tightly and said, it's my gift to Chloe and Trevor. But she wasn't done. She then mentioned that the main wedding reception still needed a few key items covered, listing off the ridiculously expensive floral arrangements and the open bar. She looked directly at me and said, we were hoping you could handle those too. It would really solidify your place in the family, you know. That was the straw that broke the camel's back. Not just the audacity of the request, but the implication. Solidify your place in the family. It was a subtle but potent poison dart. It suggested that my belonging was conditional, and the condition was money. Alex, my fiancé, saw the look on my face and put his hand gently on my knee under the table, a silent signal for me to stay calm. But I was done. I was boiling. I looked at my mother and said, Mom, I already committed to the rehearsal dinner, which is a substantial gift. I'm not paying for the flowers and the bar. That's outside my budget for this event. Her face contorted into that ugly, surprised look she gets when someone dares to say no to her. She didn't respond directly. Instead, she turned to the Petersons, rolled her eyes, and let out that terrible, high-pitched, fake laugh, the one designed to belittle. She then leaned slightly forward as if sharing a huge secret with the table and said right in front of everyone, well, you have to forgive her. She means well, but she just doesn't quite understand how real family works. She's not a real family member, after all, so she doesn't feel the same obligation. We can't expect too much from the one from the first marriage. The table went silent, not just the shocked silence of the confrontation, but a collective gasp. Trevor's parents were frozen, their faces betraying a mix of shock and embarrassment. Chloe just looked down at her plate, unwilling to meet my eye. Richard's face was a mask of hurt and rage, but before he could intervene, I spoke. So that was the situation I was in. Standing up for myself meant tearing the family apart in front of strangers, and keeping quiet meant allowing that horrible, decades-long passive aggression to finally be weaponized against me in public. I had to make a choice. Before I tell you what happened next, what I did that night to take my dignity back, I want you to pause and comment below what you would have done in my shoes. Would you have quietly endured the humiliation to save face? Or would you have made a scene and cut the toxic cord right there and then? Seriously, let me know in the comments before you hear the climax. I took a deep breath. I looked at my mother. Her eyes were still glinting with a malicious triumph, believing she had just won. I pushed my chair back. It scraped loudly against the marble floor, cutting through the silence like a knife. The waiter, who had been hovering nearby, immediately came over, sensing the tension. I waved him over. "The check, please," I said, my voice steady, dangerously quiet. My mother actually smirked, thinking I was giving in and paying for everything just to make the scene go away. The waiter brought the leather folder over, and I didn't even open it. I pulled out my credit card. I looked at the waiter and said, "I need 2 separate receipts. The first one is for Richard, my father, and me. That's just our 3 meals and drinks." The waiter, completely confused but highly professional, took my card. He processed the transaction. When he brought the receipt back, I looked at the total for Richard, Alex, and me. It was about $400. I signed it and then I wrote in the tip line. I didn't just tip well, I tipped excessively. I wrote in $500, making the total almost $1,000 just for our 3 meals. I handed the receipt back to the waiter, who was clearly flustered but trying to maintain his composure. "This is for your excellent service tonight," I told him, looking him straight in the eye. I wanted everyone at the table to see the sheer generosity I was capable of when I felt like it. Then I turned to the table, specifically to my mother. The waiter had returned the check folder, which contained the receipt for the rest of the table: Mom, Chloe, Trevor, the Petersons, and everyone else, a grand total that I knew was well over $2,000. I slid the folder right across the white linen tablecloth, stopping it precisely in front of her wine glass. I looked at my mother, who was now starting to look truly alarmed, and I repeated the words she had used against me. "You just finished telling everyone here that I am not real family, and you're right. I've realized that my money and my generosity are only considered real when they serve your needs. So I think it's time we both act on that truth." I kept my eyes locked on hers, my expression completely blank. I said, "You want to discuss what's real and what's not, Mom. Neither is my money, then. I paid for Dad, the one person here who has always treated me like family, and I tipped generously, which I am happy to do. The rest of the bill is yours. You and the real family can handle it." I got up, my chair scraping the floor again, only this time the sound was triumphant. I didn't look back at Chloe, who was silently weeping, or Trevor, who was slack-jawed, or the Petersons, who looked like they were watching a televised plane crash. I leaned down and kissed Richard on the top of his head. "I love you, Dad. I'll call you tomorrow." And then I walked out, Alex right behind me. I heard nothing as I left. The last image I have, the one burned into my memory, is looking back through the ornate doorway before it swung closed. The check folder, bright white on the dark wood table, sat directly in front of my mother. Richard had stood up, looking ready to explode, but my mother, Chloe, and everyone else was frozen. No one moved. They were paralyzed by the shame, the shock, and the realization of the massive expense now resting solely on my mother's shoulders. The aftermath was exactly what you would expect. My phone blew up that night. My mother sent a stream of incoherent, raging texts, calling me spoiled, selfish, and a disgrace to the family name. She tried to call Richard, but he wasn't answering her. The next morning, I got a text from Chloe that simply read, "You ruined everything." I didn't respond to any of them. Richard called me that afternoon. He was devastated, but not at me. "I am so sorry, kiddo," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I should have shut her down years ago. I should have protected you better. I told him he had nothing to apologize for and that he was the only family I needed." He confirmed that my mother had been forced to put the bill on her highest limit credit card and that she was now facing a financial crisis, and the Petersons had left immediately after I did, telling Chloe and Trevor that they were rethinking the wedding entirely given the volatile family environment. The confrontation was a catastrophe, but it was also a liberation. I haven't spoken to my mother or Chloe since that night, 6 months ago. Richard and I are closer than ever. He now comes over to my place every Sunday for dinner. I know I scorched the earth, but for the first time in my life, the constant passive-aggressive pain is gone. I finally drew a line in the sand, and I protected my peace. I may have lost a mother and a sister, but I gained my self-respect and solidified my relationship with my real father. The whole experience taught me a hard lesson. Your family is not defined by blood, but by behavior and love. If someone is continuously making you pay for your place in their life, not with money, but with your dignity and peace of mind, then they are not your family. They are a liability. I stood up for the 20-year-old version of me who always had to be silent and endure. I paid the only person who mattered and walked away from the rest. It was the hardest but best decision I've ever made. If you are on my side in this whole mess, please like this video right now. Subscribe for more stories like this from people who have had to cut off toxic family members. And finally, share your final thoughts on this whole mess in the comments section. Did my mom get what she deserved? And was I right to protect my dad and myself? I'll see you all in the next story.